I had never imagined that my engagement party, held in the soft, golden glow of the Beauvue Hotel ballroom, would feel like the battlefield it did that evening. The chandeliers hung like solemn witnesses, their crystals catching the light in a way that made everything seem surreal, almost like a dream I might wake from at any moment. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the silk folds of my dress, each breath shallow because of the dread I hadn't known could reside inside me. Until now, Alexander Fairchild, my fiancé, stood beside me, calm as always, his polished demeanor masking something I hadn't yet managed to decipher, whether it was confusion, fear, or loyalty divided between me and his family. His family, the Fairchilds, a lineage of old money and rigid expectations, had arrived earlier that day with smiles to tight, eyes scanning me with a calculating gaze that made me feel like I was a chess piece, poised on the board for judgment. It had started subtly. While sipping champagne in the drawing room, his mother, Marguerite Fairchild, had offered her congratulations in that sharp, clipped tone that reminded me of a velvet whip, soft on the outside, cutting underneath. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Darling, before tomorrow, the prenup must be signed. We've prepared it carefully. It's very thorough." I blinked, startled, and almost choked on the bubbles that had tickled my throat. Alexander looked away, clearing his throat. I knew his silence was deliberate. He hadn't warned me. He hadn't even hinted that his family would confront me with an ultimatum this severe. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as the weight of the situation settled on my shoulders. Sign, or the wedding, all my dreams for months, would evaporate in an instant. I excused myself to the balcony, the cold evening air a shock to my system, and I gripped the railing, staring down at the city lights twinkling below. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment leading up to this. I had never flaunted my financial achievements. The $9 million hidden in my ventures, the startup I had nurtured from an idea in my tiny apartment into a thriving tech company, had always been mine alone. I had chosen to be seen as myself, not as the woman who could dazzle with wealth, because love, real love, had to be built on truth, not fascination with bank statements. And yet, here I was, facing a family who assumed I had nothing, who tried to wield power over me with ink and paper, hoping to reduce me to a signature, a name beneath their legal terms. Returning inside, the room felt suddenly oppressive. My eyes met Alexander's, searching for some clue, some support, but his gaze was careful, guarded. "Sophie," he whispered, using my nickname, "they don't mean to scare you. It's just tradition. They want to protect their family." Nothing personal, his voice wavered slightly, betraying the conflict I had suspected. I wanted to scream, to tell him that love couldn't be measured in clauses and legal jargon. Instead, I smiled faintly, letting him see a composure I didn't entirely feel. "Protect them from what?" I asked softly, but firmly. "From me? From my independence? From the truth that I am not a knave girl without means." Marguerite stepped forward then, all elegance and authority, the silk of her gown whispering with every move. "Alex is a good man, Sophie. We only wish to ensure that the marriage is stable, that his future is secure. It is customary for families like ours." Her words dripped with the subtle poison of condescension, but I understood the game now. They didn't see me as Alexander's partner, they saw me as an intruder, someone who could potentially destabilize their meticulously maintained legacy. I drew in a deep breath. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Fairchild," I said, steadying my voice, "but I am fully capable of protecting both my interests and Alexander's. I do not need a prenup to validate my commitment, nor do I need it to justify my worth." Her lips pursed, the first visible crack in her polished demeanor. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, punctuated only by the faint strains of the string quartet playing in the corner. Alexander shifted uneasily beside me, finally speaking, with a quiet but resolute tone I hadn't heard before. "Mother, Sophie is not just capable, she is my partner. We will not be coerced into signing anything that undermines her dignity." I felt a surge of gratitude, a warmth that went straight to my chest. For a moment, the oppressive air lifted, replaced by a fragile, trembling hope. Yet I knew this was just the beginning. The Fairchilds would not relent easily. Their world, built on generations of control and wealth, did not bend to individual desire without a struggle. As the evening progressed, I found myself replaying every moment in my head, the way Marguerite's eyes narrowed, the subtle smirk of my future father-in-law, Gerard Fairchild, and the silent judgments of Alexander's cousins. Each gesture, each look, was a reminder that this was more than a prenup. It was a test. I could almost hear the whispers of their ancestors, a lineage of power that sought to measure me, weigh me, and perhaps dismiss me. My thoughts swirled between anger, disbelief, and the fiery determination that had propelled me from a modest upbringing to building a tech empire from scratch. I refused to be intimidated. I refused to let their wealth dictate the terms of my life. I excused myself. Once more, this time to the hotel's library, a quiet sanctuary of mahogany shelves and the scent of old books. I sat in a leather armchair and opened my laptop, reviewing the documents Alexander's mother had sent earlier. The prenup was ruthless, skewed entirely in their favor, with clauses that assumed I had nothing, that positioned Alexander as the sole inheritor of both protection and power. My fingers hovered over the keys as I considered my options. It was tempting to step back, to let the wedding go, to avoid confrontation, but that was never my way. I had built everything on perseverance, intelligence, and courage, and I would not compromise now, not when so much was at stake. By midnight, I had drafted an initial response in my mind, a strategy that combined honesty with firmness. I would reveal some of my financial standing, not to intimidate, but to assert that I too carried stakes, responsibilities, and agency. I would seek legal advice, ensuring that any counterproposal protected both of us equally, signaling that marriage was a partnership, not a takeover. Most importantly, I resolved to speak with Alexander openly, to bridge the silence that had allowed fear to creep between us. The thought of confronting the Fairchilds the next day filled me with both dread and a strange exhilaration. I was stepping into a battlefield I had never chosen, but one I was determined to navigate on my terms. Morning arrived with a quiet brilliance, the sun pouring through the curtains and igniting the room with warmth. I dressed carefully, choosing a sharp, confident outfit rather than something soft and yielding. As I descended to the breakfast room, Alexander met me with a look of apprehension mixed with pride. "Sophie," he said gently, "are you ready?" I nodded, feeling the gravity of our situation, yet also a sense of empowerment. "I've never been more ready," I replied, my voice steady. The Fairchilds, already assembled, looked at me as though I were a puzzle they could not solve. I felt a ripple of satisfaction at that tiny victory. The first impression mattered, and I intended to make it count. Marguerite presented the documents with a flourish, her eyes flashing. "Sign, or the wedding is off," she said, as if the ultimatum itself carried divine authority. I met her gaze calmly, allowing no tremor in my expression. "I see," I said softly. "Then we have much to discuss." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a challenge, a refusal to be cowed. Alexander stepped closer, taking my hand in his, and I felt his steady presence. Together, we faced the family that sought to control us, aware that this moment would define not just the wedding, but the principles on which our marriage would be built. Hours passed intense negotiation, in quiet discussions behind closed doors, and in moments of silent reflection. I discovered strength I hadn't fully acknowledged, a resilience born from years of building my empire in the shadows of doubt and underestimation. I realized that this confrontation, as intimidating as it was, also presented an opportunity to redefine not only our relationship with his family but the very terms of our partnership. I could assert my worth without arrogance, demand fairness without hostility, and reveal that love could coexist with independence, that marriage could be a union of equals rather than an exercise in control. By late afternoon, after countless drafts, conversations, and strategic pauses, I finally allowed myself a small, private smile. I had not yet signed anything, but I had begun to shift the dynamic. The Fairchilds were no longer just dictating terms, they were negotiating with me. And in that, I recognized the power of standing firm, of refusing to compromise on dignity, and of asserting my place not as an intruder, but as an equal partner. The ultimatum that had once felt like a trap now seemed like a challenge I was ready to meet head-on, armed with intellect, courage, and the quiet certainty of my own worth. the day after the confrontation with the Fairchilds, I woke with a mix of exhaustion and determination. The city outside my apartment hummed as if nothing extraordinary had happened, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. I poured coffee, letting the warmth seep through my hands, grounding me, and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers and notes I had prepared the night before. I knew the next steps had to be calculated, precise. I couldn't allow emotion to dictate the outcome, though it raged fiercely inside me. The Fairchilds had assumed I was naive, powerless, and dependent, but I had a secret weapon: the wealth I had quietly accumulated over the years. It wasn't about flaunting money, it was about leverage, proof that I was a partner in every sense of the word. I contacted my attorney, Simone Blake, a formidable woman with a reputation for turning legal battles into triumphs. Her calm voice, over the phone, grounded me. "Sophie," she said, "we need to frame this not as defiance but as fairness. We'll protect both of you, establish equality, and make it clear that coercion will not dictate a marital contract." I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just about documents. It was about asserting my identity against a family steeped in centuries of tradition and expectation. We scheduled a meeting for that evening at my office, a glass-walled space that reflected the skyline, reminding me of the empire I had quietly built. Alexander arrived, still unsure but visibly emboldened. We spoke honestly, each of us revealing vulnerabilities that had been shadowed by fear and assumptions. "I should have told you sooner about their ultimatum," he admitted, the weight of guilt in his voice. I shook my head, placing my hand over his, "and I should have shared the truth about my finances. But none of that matters now. What matters is that we present ourselves as equals, that we refuse to be bullied." His eyes, usually so guarded, softened. "Together," he said simply. And I nodded, feeling a surge of warmth that blended seamlessly with the determination coursing through me. Together, we could face the Fairchilds. Not as adversaries but as a united front. Simone arrived with her briefcase, every step deliberate, radiating authority. We spread the original prenup across the table, and I watched her scan it, noting the clauses that were inherently one-sided. "They've assumed you have no assets, no influence," she observed, her tone sharp but controlled. I nodded. "Exactly. They want to reduce me to a blank line, to strip me of agency." Simone's fingers danced over her tablet, drafting amendments that would create balance, protection for both parties, fair asset division, and provisions that ensured neither of us could be coerced into submission. It was intricate, painstaking, but necessary. This was more than a contract. It was a statement, a declaration that I, too, had value, and I would not shrink to fit someone else's expectations. When we arrived at the Fairchild estate that evening, the air was thick with tension. The mansion's grandeur was suffocating, every marble column and ornate painting a reminder of centuries of wealth and control. Marguerite greeted us at the door, her smile tight, her posture impeccable. "Sophie Alexander," she said, almost dismissively, "we hope you understand the importance of finalizing the prenup." I returned her gaze evenly. "We understand, Mrs. Fairchild, but we hope you also understand that fairness is non-negotiable." Alexander's hand found mine under the table, and the squeeze was subtle but grounding. I felt the courage in that simple touch, the reassurance that we were no longer navigating this alone. Negotiations began formally in the grand study, the heavy scent of polished wood mingling with the underlying tension. Gerard Fairchild presided over the proceedings, his voice calm but authoritative, a subtle challenge wrapped in civility. "Our family has always valued legacy," he stated. "We trust you recognize the need to preserve stability." I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact, choosing my words carefully. "Legacy is preserved through respect, honesty, and equality," I said. "Not by assuming one partner's worth over the others. Alexander and I are equals. This contract should reflect that, or it is not worth signing." The room was silent for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Then Marguerite's lips pressed into a thin line, clearly unsettled by my forthrightness. As the discussion progressed, I revealed portions of my financial portfolio not in arrogance, but as evidence that I was a stakeholder in every sense. The Fairchild's faces changed subtly, a flicker of unease crossing features that had been practiced in superiority for decades. Alexander spoke up too, his voice gaining strength. Mom, Dad, Sophie isn't just a fiancée, she's my partner, my equal. If you can't respect that, this isn't just about the prenup. It's about how you value our relationship, I felt. A swell of pride at his courage, knowing that his stance would redefine the family dynamics. Hours passed as Simone and I presented our revised prenup, every clause carefully explained, every nuance designed to protect both sides. The Fairchilds countered with objections, but we were prepared. I remained composed, even as frustration and fatigue gnawed at my edges. I realized that strength wasn't in dominance. It was in clarity, precision, and the unwavering belief in one's rights. Each amendment we proposed was met with resistance, but also with grudging recognition. By midnight, the atmosphere had shifted. The Fairchilds, accustomed to unquestioned authority, had met their match. At one point, Gerard leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You are formidable," he admitted, the weight of the word surprising me in its honesty. I allowed a small smile. "I've had to be," I replied softly. "Life doesn't reward hesitation, and neither does marriage when one party seeks equality." Alexander squeezed my hand, and for the first time that day, I felt that our partnership was tangible, unshakable. We had not only defended our interests but had redefined the terms on which our union would stand. By the time we left the estate, the city lights had burned a deep orange across the horizon. We walked side by side in silence, the weight of victory settling comfortably between us. I realized that this journey, painful and draining as it had been, had revealed the core of our relationship: mutual respect, shared responsibility, and unwavering support. I had confronted not only the Fairchilds but also the assumptions that had allowed them to wield power over me. In doing so, I had reclaimed my agency, my voice, and my dignity. That night, I lay awake reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From my modest beginnings to building a tech empire, I had always relied on perseverance and clarity of vision. Now, I have added something more vital: the ability to stand firm in personal relationships, to demand fairness and respect, and to navigate even the most intimidating power structures with integrity. I realized that love, when coupled with equality, could withstand the pressures of wealth, tradition, and expectation. I also understood that transparency and courage were far more compelling than secrecy and submission. In the days that followed, Alexander and I met with the Fairchilds multiple times, finalizing every detail of the balanced prenup. The process was meticulous and often tense, but we remained united, our communication impeccable, and our strategy consistent. I watched as Alexander began to assert his independence from familial pressure, a transformation that thrilled me. Together, we created an agreement that honored our partnership, respected our individuality, and sent a clear message: we were equals, and neither family nor fortune could diminish that. By the time the wedding arrived, the tension had eased into a cautious respect. The Fairchilds, though still steeped in tradition, had come to recognize that coercion would not win. Alexander and I entered the ceremony hand in hand, aware that our triumph lay not in the exchange of rings but in the equality we had fought to establish. Every smile, every whispered word, was a testament to the journey we had endured, the battle for recognition, respect, and fairness. And though the path had been arduous, it had solidified a foundation that no external pressure could shake. The wedding day arrived with a clarity I hadn't expected. Sunlight spilled across the manicured gardens of the Fairchild estate, and I could hear the soft hum of preparations as staff moved about, tending to flowers, chairs, and floral arches. There was an almost surreal calm in the air, as if the world itself was pausing to witness a transformation. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my suite, taking in the gown I had chosen, not extravagant, but elegant, a reflection of the woman I had become through trials, strategy, and unwavering resolve. I felt Alexander's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "You look incredible," he said quietly, but I could see the pride and recognition in his eyes, the acknowledgement that this day was more than a wedding. It was a culmination of battles won, respect earned, and love affirmed on equal footing. As guests began to arrive, I felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. The Fairchilds were present, their expressions carefully neutral, yet there was a subtle shift in their posture. Marguerite's gaze, once sharp and assessing, lingered on me with something resembling grudging admiration. Gerard's eyes, usually unreadable, met mine briefly, and I allowed myself the faintest smile of acknowledgement. This silent recognition was as meaningful as any words could have been. Alexander guided me to the aisle, his hand firm yet tender around mine. Every step felt purposeful, a walk not only toward our union but toward the equality and respect we had fought to secure. The string quartet began to play, their melody weaving through the garden and wrapping around my heart with each measured note. During the ceremony, I felt the weight of the past weeks lift as we exchanged vows that were deeply personal, unscripted, and reflective of our journey. I promise to stand with you as an equal, in honesty and in partnership, Alexander whispered, his voice steady and heartfelt. I returned the words, feeling their truth resonate in every fiber of my being. I promise to love you as your partner, to honor our equality, and to face the future together, unafraid and undiminished. The officiant, a family friend with a kind smile, nodded solemnly, and as we sealed our vows with a kiss, a sense of triumph enveloped me. This was not just a wedding, it was a declaration that love built on truth, respect, and shared values could withstand any challenge, even the rigid expectations of old money families. After the ceremony, during the reception, we found a quiet moment away from the bustling crowd. Alexander leaned close and whispered, "You were extraordinary through all of this. I'm proud of how you stood your ground." I felt a warmth spread through me, a deep satisfaction beyond words. "We did it together," I replied. "You stood with me, and we showed them that partnership isn't dictated by legacy or wealth. It's about mutual respect." We laughed softly, the tension of past weeks dissolving in that simple, shared understanding. In that moment, I realized that the real victory wasn't the prenup signed or the approval gained, it was the establishment of our partnership on principles we both valued, ensuring that no external force could undermine the foundation we had built. Marguerite approached us later, her posture less rigid, her tone less sharp. "Sophie Alexander," she said, her voice measured, "I must admit, you've handled yourself with grace and intelligence. The prenup has been adjusted fairly, and I see now that equality is essential in a union like yours." I nodded politely, acknowledging her words, but more importantly, I felt a sense of closure. The balance we had fought for was recognized, and while acceptance didn't come overnight, the acknowledgement itself marked a turning point. Alexander's parents were no longer adversaries attempting to control us. They had begun to understand that our marriage was our own, a partnership that would be respected regardless of tradition or wealth. The rest of the evening flowed like a celebration of not only love but resilience, strategy, and personal agency. Guests offered congratulations, some expressing admiration for how we had managed a complex situation with poise and integrity. My closest friends whispered words of encouragement and praise, yet I noticed the subtle glances of the Fairchild relatives, their acknowledgement that the bride had emerged not as an outsider but as a force to be reckoned with. I took a deep breath, letting the satisfaction of triumph settle into my chest, realizing that this experience had changed me. Not only had it fortified my bond with Alexander, but it had also reaffirmed my confidence, self-worth, and the power of standing firm when challenged. Later, as the stars emerged over the estate, Alexander and I shared a quiet moment on the terrace. The city lights twinkled below, mirroring the depth of the journey we had navigated. "Do you think they'll ever see you the way I do?" he asked softly, his arm around my waist. I smiled, leaning into him, the warmth of our partnership radiating through the cool night air. "Perhaps not completely, but it doesn't matter," I replied. "We've established what counts: the truth between us, our equality, and our shared commitment. That's what will endure." He kissed my temple, and I felt an overwhelming sense of contentment, knowing that our love had not been defined by coercion, assumption, or inherited wealth, but by choice, honesty, and mutual respect. The following weeks were a continuation of the lessons we had learned. Every interaction with the Fairchilds carried a subtle shift. They approached me with a newfound respect, no longer attempting to dominate or dictate. Alexander and I, having faced the crucible together, found our communication deepened and our trust solidified. I took steps to integrate aspects of my financial transparency carefully, ensuring that our joint decisions were made with shared insight rather than suspicion. We celebrated victories both small and large, from minor business successes to the small, intimate moments of daily life that underscored our commitment. Every day reaffirmed that a marriage built on equality and truth was stronger than one founded on wealth, appearances, or coercion. In our private moments, Alexander often reflected on the transformation he had undergone, moving from a man swayed by familial pressure to a partner committed to fairness and honesty. I felt proud, not just for myself but for him, for the courage it took to stand against ingrained expectations and choose a partnership based on principles rather than submission. We spoke openly about boundaries, about respect, and about how to maintain independence within unity. These conversations, sometimes long and sometimes quiet, became the scaffolding of a marriage that would endure beyond circumstance, wealth, or societal scrutiny. The story of our struggle and triumph became a quiet example among friends and colleagues. The importance of knowing one's worth, asserting agency, and navigating familial pressure with intelligence and calm. We were not merely a wealthy couple uniting families. We were two individuals who had faced a challenge deliberately designed to intimidate and emerged with dignity intact. The Fairchilds, once imposing and unyielding, became part of a larger narrative that included respect, recognition, and compromise. The balance we achieved in the prenup was symbolic, a tangible proof that fairness could coexist with tradition, that love could coexist with strength. As the months unfolded, Alexander and I built our lives on the foundation of those hard-won principles. I returned to my business ventures with renewed vigor, supported and encouraged by a partner who respected my autonomy, my intellect, and my ambition. We hosted gatherings that blended old and new, tradition and innovation, always mindful that our marriage was defined not by wealth or pedigree but by shared values and mutual regard. Our circle of friends and colleagues marveled at the strength of our bond, unaware of the quiet battles that had forged it, but benefiting from the example of partnership, communication, and equality we embodied. Through this journey, I learned that standing firm in one's worth was not an act of defiance, but an act of love for oneself and for the person you choose to share your life with. I realized that transparency, courage, and collaboration could transform even the most coercive environments into spaces of respect and understanding. The prenup, once a symbol of threat, became a testament to what could be achieved when individuals refused to yield to intimidation and instead negotiated from a position of knowledge, fairness, and integrity. Looking back, I feel a deep sense of pride, not pride in wealth, nor pride in victory alone, but pride in the evolution of our love, tempered by struggle, strengthened by negotiation, and secured by equality. Alexander and I continue to build a life filled with laughter, shared dreams, and partnership, knowing that the trials we faced only deepened our connection and solidified the foundation of our marriage. Our journey serves as a reminder that love, when intertwined with honesty, respect, and courage, is unshakable, even in the face of centuries-old expectations and pressure. Moral lesson. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Today's story reminds us that standing firm in your worth is not arrogance, it is empowerment. Life may present challenges disguised as ultimatums. People may attempt to dictate your choices, and tradition may try to overshadow fairness, but your voice matters. True partnership is built on equality, trust, and transparent communication. Wealth and status can be intimidating, yet they cannot replace courage, integrity, and mutual respect. Sophia's journey teaches us that negotiating with knowledge and clarity allows you to reclaim agency, transform power dynamics, and create relationships where both parties are seen, valued, and honored. When love meets courage, even the most entrenched pressures can be navigated successfully. Let this story encourage you to embrace your truth, assert your boundaries, and approach relationships with honesty and equality. Remember, the strongest bonds are forged not in submission, but in mutual recognition and respect. Like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and comment your perspective on standing firm in your worth.